In his sterile penthouse office overlooking a Christmas-lit Charlotte, tech CEO Arthur Harrington swirled his 30-year-old scotch and stared at the letter, not as a plea from a past lover, but as a calculated attack on his multi-billion-dollar IPO. The floor-to-ceiling glass reflected a glittering city he felt no connection to, a city preparing for a holiday he wouldn't be celebrating. His world was one of secure data, market projections, and absolute control. This letter, printed on cheap copy paper, felt like a virus in his clean room. He remembered Alara Vance, of course, a brilliant programmer from nearly 12 years ago. She was sharp, ambitious, and, as he recalled, difficult. A black woman who hadn't known her place in his burgeoning tech empire. They'd had a brief, regrettable relationship that he'd ended firmly, citing the demands of the company. And now, 11 years later, just weeks before his company, Harrington Dynamics, was set to go public, she reappeared. The timing was too precise. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a shakedown, plain and simple. Miles away, in a small, drafty bungalow, Alara Vance stared at her own stack of papers. They weren't stock options. They were overdue medical bills piled high on the kitchen counter, right next to a small, sparse Christmas tree. The house was filled with the sounds Arthur's penthouse lacked: the rattle of an old radiator, the quiet hum of an oxygen machine, and the shallow, labored breathing of her daughter Zoe from the living room couch. Earlier that day, Dr. Miles had delivered the news with a practiced, somber kindness. "The standard treatments aren't working anymore, Alara," he'd said, his eyes full of pity she didn't want. "There is an experimental therapy in Boston, but it's $800,000. And insurance won't touch it." Her son, Marcus, sat at the table, pretending to do homework but watching his mother with an 11-year-old's protective fury. Alara looked at her daughter, pale and weak but still fighting. Her pride, the very thing that had kept her silent for over a decade, evaporated. She went to an old wooden box and pulled out 2 items: a private DNA test she had run years ago, just so she would know the truth, and a small, faded photo of Arthur from an old company picnic. With shaking hands, she wrote a simple, desperate plea, stuffed it in an envelope with a copy of the DNA results, and drove to the post office. She paid the extra fee for certified mail. When the certified letter landed on Arthur's desk, he read Alara's plea. He saw the DNA report. He felt nothing for the child. He felt only the cold sting of prejudice. This was an extortion attempt, timed for maximum damage. He buzzed his attorney, Benjamin. "Benjamin," Arthur said, his voice flat. "That programmer I mentioned? Alara Vance. She's trying to extort me. She claims I have twins." "Handle it." Arthur hangs up, takes another sip of scotch, and turns back to his IPO projections. Miles away, Alara is served with a lawsuit. Arthur Harrington is suing her for fraud and defamation. Arthur just sued the mother of his children instead of helping her. The battle has officially begun. If you are still watching and you find this story compelling, please comment with the number 8 below, just to let us know you're still here with us. And if you want to see how Alara fights back against this injustice, I highly recommend you subscribe to Black King and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a single chapter. Your support helps us continue to create powerful content that informs and inspires. Now, let's see what happens next. The lawsuit papers felt heavier than a tombstone in Alara's hands. He wasn't just saying no. He was declaring war. She sank onto her worn sofa, the formal, cruel language blurring through her tears. Fraud. Defamation. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. He was painting her as the predator. She remembered the cold, ambitious man who had ended their relationship 11 years ago, citing distractions from his grand plan. This lawsuit was just an extension of that same ruthless focus. Marcus found her sitting there in the dark, the papers scattered on her lap. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just sat beside her, his small body rigid with a protective instinct that was far too old for his 11 years. Watching his mother, the strongest person he knew, crumble like this, the quiet anger he felt toward his unknown father began to harden into a cold, permanent resolve. The next day was a blur of frantic, whispered phone calls. Alara huddled in her kitchen, using a cheap prepaid phone, while Zoe slept. The responses from Charlotte's top law firms were all the same: a polite, professional terror. I'm sorry, Ms. Vance, but Harrington Dynamics is a significant client in this city. We have a conflict of interest. Another said, we simply don't have the resources to litigate against Mr. Harrington's firm. By noon, she had been rejected 14 times. She was legally invisible, erased by his wealth before she even had a chance to speak. Defeated, she followed a flimsy lead from a legal aid clerk to a 24-hour diner downtown. The uptown diner was a world away from Arthur's high-rise, smelling of stale coffee and burnt bacon. Its vinyl boots were cracked, holding the ghosts of 1,000 desperate, late-night conversations. In a back booth sat Maggie Bennett, a woman in her 50s with sharp, tired eyes and a reputation for civil rights cases. Alara laid everything on the sticky table: the DNA test, the $800,000 medical estimate, and Arthur's lawsuit. I don't have any money, Alara whispered, her voice hoarse with shame. Maggie read the lawsuit, her expression hardening. He's accusing you of fraud? With a DNA test attached. She looked up, her gaze cutting through Alara's panic. This isn't a lawsuit, Ms. Vance. This is an abusive process. Men like Harrington build their empires on the assumption that people like you will stay quiet. She slid the papers back. I'll take it. Pro bono. Alara burst into tears, a ragged, ugly sob of pure relief. She paid for their 2 coffees at the register. Her total was $4.50. She carefully placed a single, crumpled dollar bill on the counter as a tip. It was all she could spare. Maggie watched that small, precise act of dignity, and her resolve to fight turned to steel. Just as Alara was walking out, her phone buzzed with a news alert. A gossip blog, tipped off by someone in the legal sphere, had broken the story. The headline was brutal. Billionaire CEO sues desperate black mother, trying to save her dying child. The private battle was now a public war. Arthur, seeing the headline on his phone, was furious at the leak. He called Benjamin. This is what she wanted, a public circus. Fine. I want her bank records, her work history, anything. I'm not being extorted by this woman. The family courtroom was cold, but Alara felt the heat of Arthur Harrington's stare from across the room, a look not of recognition, but of pure, unadulterated contempt. He was flanked by 3 lawyers, led by Benjamin, who looked smug and perfectly at ease in the dark-paneled, intimidating room. Alara sat beside Maggie, clutching a folder containing Zoe's medical reports. She felt small, out of place and terrified, but she met Arthur's gaze, holding it until he looked away first. Benjamin began, his voice smooth and practiced. He painted a picture of a calculating woman who had intentionally hidden these children for 11 years. He stressed the timing, linking Alara's ambush directly to the Harrington Dynamics IPO. This is a classic extortion attempt, Your Honor, Benjamin argued. Furthermore, the alleged medical condition has been conveniently exaggerated to apply maximum pressure. Maggie Bennett stood up slowly, her voice calm but cutting. Your Honor, Mr. Harrington's IPO date is completely irrelevant to Zoe Vance's congestive heart failure. This isn't about the past 11 years. It's about the next 11 days. We have medical reports from 3 specialists. She placed the folder on the desk. We are not alleging a condition. We are stating a fact. And as for paternity, my client welcomes an immediate, court-supervised DNA test to settle the matter. Judge Winters, a pragmatic woman in her 60s who had seen every tactic imaginable, looked at Arthur's team with visible disdain. Mr. Benjamin, your client's lawsuit for fraud is inflammatory and, frankly, looks a lot like intimidation to this court. I am staying that suit indefinitely. The color drained from Benjamin's face. The judge granted Maggie's motions. I am ordering a court-supervised DNA test for Mr. Harrington and both children. The results are to be delivered directly to my chambers in 48 hours. And I am appointing an independent medical expert to review this child's case. Today, it was a total victory for Alara, a clean sweep. Arthur's primary weapon, his power to sue and bury her in legal fees, had been neutralized. He had lost control. Arthur stormed out of the courtroom furious. The judge's order felt like a betrayal. He was used to giving orders, not taking them. He snapped at Benjamin. I don't care what that judge ordered. I want my own investigation. I want boots on the ground at that clinic. I want to know everything about this experimental treatment. Now, Judge Winters just shut down Arthur's aggressive lawsuit, and the court-ordered DNA test is underway. The results are coming in 48 hours. But Arthur is furious, and now he's launching his own private investigation in the shadows. The truth is about to come out. If you are still watching this, and you believe the truth needs to be exposed, please comment with the number 8 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed, I highly recommend you do. The next chapter is the climax of this entire story, and you don't want to miss it. Hit that subscribe button for Black King and ring the bell. Your support helps us continue to create powerful content that informs and inspires you. Now, let's get back to the story. The courtroom air crackled with tension as Judge Winters held up 2 files, the 99.999% positive DNA match, and a scathing independent medical report that confirmed Zoe Vance was in critical heart failure. Arthur felt the blood drain from his face. The fraud case his entire defense rested on had just evaporated. Alara sat perfectly still, tears streaming silently down her face. "These facts are now established," Judge Winters said, her voice sharp and final. "Mr. Harrington, you are the father, and your daughter is critically ill. How do you respond?" Benjamin, though clearly flustered, stood up, pivoting to their backup argument. "Your Honor, paternity was only part of our concern. The fact remains, Ms. Vance's parental alienation, her decision to hide these children for 11 years. Arthur wasn't listening. His phone had vibrated. It was an email from his private investigator marked Urgent, Zoe Vance. He'd ordered them to find dirt on the clinic. He opened the file under the table. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a 30-second video clip, grainy timestamped from the hospital ICU 2 nights ago. He saw Zoe. She wasn't just sick. She was seizing, her small body convulsing under a tangle of wires. The image was raw, terrifying, and it instantly unlocked a memory Arthur had buried for decades. His own mother, in a different hospital bed, her body just as frail, just as ravaged by the illness that finally took her. "He doesn't care." A voice pierced the courtroom. "Marcus." He was standing in the back of the gallery, having skipped school, his face red with tears and rage. "He just doesn't want us. He sued my mom because she's black." The courtroom exploded. The prejudice, which had been the unspoken subtext of the entire case, was now screaming in the open. Judge Winters banged her gavel. But Arthur didn't hear her. He was frozen, the video of Zoe burning in his mind, the memory of his mother choking him, and the raw, painful truth of his son's words hitting him like a physical blow. He stood up, shaking. "Benjamin, shut up." He looked at Judge Winters, but he was speaking to Alara, to Marcus, to the memory of his mother. "He's right," Arthur said, his voice hoarse. "Your Honor, I withdraw the suit. I will pay for all of it. The treatment, the transfer to Boston, whatever it costs. I'll pay it today." Alara, who has been holding her breath, lets out a sound, half sob, half gasp, and pitches forward, fainting from the release of 48 hours of unbearable stress. 3 days later, Arthur Harrington stood awkwardly in the sterile white hallway of the Boston Children's Hospital, a place his money had secured, but where his presence felt entirely unwelcome. Zoe was stable, the experimental treatment already underway, and Alara, though exhausted, watched him with a wary, cautious disbelief. He had flown in on his private jet, but the gesture felt hollow. He brought a gift for Zoe, a high-end portable speaker preloaded with every Chopin nocturne, a nod to the story. "Mom says you like classical music," Zoe whispered, her voice weak but curious. In the hallway, Marcus blocked his path, glaring at him with the same protective fury from the courtroom. "You can't just buy us," Marcus said, his voice tight. "You tried to destroy our mom." Arthur, for the first time in his life, had no defense. He simply nodded. "You are 100% right," he said, his voice quiet. "What I did, it was inexcusable." Weeks later, with Zoe showing remarkable improvement, Arthur summoned Alara to his penthouse office in Charlotte. She arrived expecting to sign contentious child support papers. Instead, Arthur, looking tired and older, slid a thick legal binder across his desk. "These are estate planning documents," he said. He explained he had created a trust fund, $600 million, split equally between Zoe and Marcus. Alara was speechless, her mind unable to process the number. "Arthur, this is—" "I just wanted help," she stammered. "I didn't ask for this." "This isn't a payout, Alara," he said, turning to look out the window, just as he had in Chapter 1. But this time his voice was different. He told her about his own father, a man who became emotionally absent after Arthur's mother died, burying himself in work. "I was becoming him," Arthur admitted, his voice thick. "I measured my life in market caps and IPOs. That day in court, when I saw that video, when I heard your son, I realized I was about to abandon my real legacy. This isn't a payment. It's their birthright. I've told my board I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations. The money is easy. But I'd like to try to be their father. If you'll let me." 1 year later, the sterile rhythmic beeping of the hospital heart monitor was a distant memory, replaced by the chaotic, joyful sound of Zoe Vance arguing with her brother over who got the last Christmas cookie. The family was gathered in a large, comfortable home in a quiet Charlotte suburb, a home Arthur had bought for them, a world away from his cold penthouse. It was Christmas morning, and the room was a warm, bright mess of torn wrapping paper and family clutter. Arthur, dressed in a simple knit sweater, watched Zoe tear open another gift. She was vibrant and healthy, her cheeks full of color. He remembered the pale, gaunt child in the hospital bed and the grainy video that had shattered his defenses. He had officially stepped back from his CEO role, pouring his energy into the new Harrington Foundation and, more importantly, into learning how to be a father. He was now helping Marcus, who was no longer a small, angry boy but a reserved teenager, assemble a complex robotics kit. They worked in silence, focused. Later, Zoe sat at the new piano in the living room and began to play a complex Chopin nocturne. Arthur, who also played, sat beside her, and they discussed the phrasing of the piece. Alara watched them from the doorway, a soft, genuine smile on her face as she saw a real bond forming over their shared intellectual curiosity. At brunch, the new family, the white father, the black mother, and their mixed-race children, passed plates of food. Marcus looked up from his robotics manual. You got the wiring wrong on the servo motor," he said, pointing at Arthur's work. Arthur laughed, a relaxed, easy sound. "You're right. Show me." Marcus actually smiled, a small, fleeting expression of connection. As the kids ran off to test the robot, Arthur turned to Alara. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for giving me a second chance. For not letting my worst moment define me." Alara looked at him, her gaze clear and steady. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Arthur. That's what kindness is about." The journey from a cold courtroom to a warm family Christmas reminds us that even the most hardened hearts can be changed by the truth. When we let go of prejudice, we open the door to true compassion. Like a dormant seed, a single act of kindness, even one planted late, can grow into a legacy of love that outshines any fortune. If this story of redemption touched your heart, consider sharing that warmth with someone who may need it today.